Okay, I'm going to give you a little module on how to do an oral history. Your interviews that you will be doing with your subjects are not going to be quite so in-depth because remember, you want to look for a particular event, but this will hopefully give you some ideas about how to conduct your interview. So first off, what's an oral history? It's a recording of a person's memories. It can be very structured and formal, or it can be like you're sitting around the kitchen table and getting someone to tell you a story. And that's essentially it. It's not that fancy. What it isn't, it's not journalism. You're not trying to figure out why this person is, saying what they're saying. It's not a documentary. You're probably not going to get everything you want out of this interview, so I'll warn you up front. It's not an inquisition. You're not going to try to torture them and draw things out. You want them to be comfortable and tell you what they feel comfortable telling you with. It's not psychological therapy. You're not going to get some sort of Freudian whatever out of it. It's just a story. And they don't feel that they need to tell the entire story of an entire era. In other words, keep them on track with your event. Don't make them feel like they have to tell you all of the Vietnam War, just their little portion. And it's not going to be a record of every single detail of this person's life. As much fun as it would be in some situations to do this, that's not realistic. We're only going to have you sit down and talk to them very briefly. You'll probably want to record this interview. It's really hard to pay attention to what someone is saying and try to take notes at the same time. And recording is not hard, especially if you have a cell phone or even a laptop will work. There's no need to go out and buy any special equipment. Cell phones work just great. If you want to do a video, that's also fine. However you want to capture this story, but make sure your subject is comfortable with this. I tend to like to do audio recording, if only because people are always saying, I'm going to break the camera, that sort of thing. So that's why audio recording might be sufficient for this task. If you are going to do video recording, make sure you use a tripod. Don't just try to handhold the camera and take the video that way. Your hand's going to move. It's going to be a pain to actually not only do it, but watch it afterwards. You don't want to see something that's... So be careful with that. One of the warnings I would give you, if you are using your smartphone or cell phone, or however you're recording, is to get the pickup, the microphone, which is on a cell phone down here, get that as close to your subject's mouth as you can. If it's out in front of them like that, that's fine. Another hint for the audio. Oftentimes you're going to find people thumping the table. How to get around that is to find something soft and put it underneath. A bunch of paper towels or some foam or padding of any kind or a couch pillow, anything that's going to keep your subject from banging on the table and making more noise than you really need. So when you're setting up this process, make an appointment, whoever you're going to talk to. Make sure you find a nice quiet place to sit down and talk. Someplace that you're not going to be interrupted for an hour. Someplace where there's not a lot of foot traffic or car traffic happening. But also make it something or someplace that your subject is comfortable with. If you're in a fancy restaurant or something like that, they're going to be uptight. So kitchen tables are just fine for this. When you start your recording, always set up ground rules before you start, mainly to say that if your subject does not want to talk about something, there's no need for them to talk about it. They should only share what they're comfortable sharing with. Now, you might find in the course of the interview, they start kind of warming up. They start wanting to tell you more of the story. Especially, could often say something like, you know, I've never told anybody this, but in a way, that's a wonderful thing to happen in an oral history. But I will warn you, there is probably a reason why they have never told anyone before. I've had a lot of students whose parents or grandparents were in war zones or something like that, and be prepared for a story that's not very nice or that could be problematic when told within the family. So just be warned, that might happen. So make sure you don't have TVs on, no radios, turn off your phones, unless you're doing it to record. And just create a one-to-one conversation. Don't have a lot of other people in the room, because what always happens is that someone forgets a detail and starts yelling to someone else about, oh, who was that? What was that? What year was that? Or someone else from the outside is going to start yelling, no, that was 1943, not 1942. So be careful about that. The only exception to that rule would be if you've got someone to do the recording for you, to monitor the audio, to look through the video camera. That person has to, number one, pay attention, and number two, stay awake. Very embarrassing when your camera person falls asleep. I know. I was a camera person. Boy, did I get in trouble. Anyway, so at the beginning of the recording, when you get everything going, do a sound check first. Ask the person to say a few things. Ask them what they had for breakfast. That kind of gets them in a less formal, more comfortable attitude. And then turn off your recorder, back it up, and listen to it to make sure you have a decent recording. Very important to do to make sure you've got it all down. It's really embarrassing to go through an interview and realize the recording is not happening. You want to hit the rolling button, start your recording rolling, and ask your subject to say their name, maybe their address, definitely the date that the recording is made. This will actually give you an identification on this recording that might be quite valuable somewhere down the road. Also give the name of the interviewer. When you're asking questions, do so in a very clear, loud voice, because remember, the microphone's over by your subject. So, what do you ask them? Well, tell them first of all what the assignment is. Give them some idea about what you would like. If you're not getting all of the information you want, or if you feel like you'd like to get more information, ask them about personal details, not intimate details, personal details. Ask them about pets. Ask them about food. Ask them about shopping, clothes that they might have been wearing. Ask them about bikes or cars that they might have had at the time. Ask them about the technology, phones, radios, TVs. That might play a role. Ask them about movies and theater that they might have seen at the time. That also plays into their memories. Sports, games, schools, vacations. Hopefully you're getting the idea of what sort of questions or queries that you can get them interested in the subject and bring more out. Otherwise, it's going to be real stale. So you definitely want to see them give their own personal imprint on what they're talking about. And so you might even ask them about their aspirations at the time. If they're talking about when they were a young person or in high school or college, ask them about what they wanted to do ahead of time, what their dreams were. Sometimes you can get some very interesting responses that way. Now, you need to listen very carefully to what they're saying. This is about them. You do not want to insert your own feelings, necessarily, except to keep them talking. You do not want to correct their memories. These are their memories. This is what they remember. Accept that this process is highly subjective and that you're going to just capture what they thought. You're not going to capture necessarily what the actual event was. You're getting someone's point of view about it. And don't interrupt. Let them talk. But do ask for clarification. If they talk about a technology that you've never heard about, a family member that you have no idea who it is, or if you need something explained, ask very quickly, what do you mean by that? When was that happening? So definitely leave it up to them to give you the responses. Silence is golden in this process. In other words, they're going to talk to fill the space. Oftentimes people get nervous if it's quiet and two people are facing each other. So it's very likely they'll start talking if you just be quiet. It's not that important for you to be on this tape. What's important is for them to be on this tape. Be careful about laughing if they're telling a funny story, because you might cover up what they're saying. Just remember, silence, they're going to try to fill that. So it might get them to talk even more. What should you as an interviewer do? Focus on them completely. Have your eyes meet their eyes. Oftentimes that will keep their eyes from going on the camera and getting them nervous. So keep very close eye contact. Don't be looking down at your notes if you've taken notes ahead of time. React to what they're saying. Smile, frown, nod, simple hand gestures. Don't keep doing that. That's kind of rude. And watch to see if they're hesitant about answering a question, because that might mean they don't want to answer it. Go on to the next question. And make sure, especially if you're talking to an older person, they do not get too tired. Sometimes you can get older people will tire themselves out doing this process and they won't tell you. So watch to see if they start slumping down in the chair, if they start getting slower and slower. So keep an eye on that. Another rule is to expect the unexpected. In other words, have tissues, Kleenex handy. Sometimes they cry, sometimes you'll cry. Have water handy because talking is going to make them thirsty. Have some hard candy or cough drops nearby. As strange as that sounds, sometimes people start coughing and get that cough drop or hard candy in them, and that's going to help them. Always have within your reach extra batteries, extra audio tapes or videotapes if you're using that, whatever you need to switch out during the middle of an interview, because you might run out of batteries. So have that all available. Oftentimes when I do this, I will have lights on the subject. An overhead kitchen light, a window works very well. However, sometimes, especially around here, we can have a storm run in and it turns very dark, and you don't realize that because your eyes are automatically adjusting. So be sure and have lights on, even if it's the middle of the day. Be prepared to have the recording within your reach so that you can click it off very quickly, because they might ask you to do that. And be prepared if they give you, if they tell you, you know, I never told anyone about this before. As I said before, they might be revealing some information that's extremely personal or extremely painful. So you've done your interview. Now what do? Immediately check your recording. Make sure it's okay. The second thing you need to do is label your recording. If you're using a file on your computer, put that person's name on it. Then talk to your subject. If they have images and they're willing to let you scan them or take a photograph of them, that would be great for your project. Don't actually bring the photographs in. Let them keep the photographs for themselves. As far as who owns this recording, you both do. Legally, the interviewer owns the recording and the interviewee or the subject owns the recording. So they might want a copy, and it's perfectly acceptable. In fact, it's preferable that you give them a copy. Always follow what archivists follow in terms of making copies. They use the system that they call LOCKSS, LOCKSS, and that stands for lots of copies keeps stuff safe. Put this interview on a thumb drive, burn it on a CD, upload it to the cloud if that's okay, put it on a hard drive, something that will keep it in many different formats. Things fail, your house could get flooded or burned down. You want separate recordings on this. Your family and friends might also want recordings of this. This is going to be something that's a family heirloom. That's going to go down in your family. And people in the future are going to want to see it. So definitely make more copies of it and hand it out to the family so that they can have it as well. You might even want to donate it to an archive or a museum. The Library of Congress collects stories about World War II, and I think they collect stories about Vietnam. So look on their website, see if they would be interested in that, and make sure your subject's okay with it too. Don't just do it without telling them. So why do we do oral histories? Because in 1998, Roy Rosenzweig and David Thielen, Roy Rosenzweig was a professor at George Mason University, published a book called The Presence of the Past, in which they surveyed 1,500 people about their understanding of the past. And I've got some graphics from that study that I'll show you. The respondents were asked to rate their answers on a scale from 0 to 10. The numbers on the graph represent the mean of the responses. So 0 is not good, 10 is good. The way people felt the most connected with the past was with gathering with their families and getting family stories. Down below that is visiting a history museum or historic site. Way down the list is studying history in school. That's why we're doing this. People are more comfortable with that. The sources that people trust the most, museums, interestingly, come out on top on that. However, personal accounts are just below that. People trust that part of history. And remember, as part of this assignment, I'm asking you to find an article from this time period that talks about the same exact event. So if you look down on that list, movies, television programs, nonfiction books, those score very low on the list. So definitely it's very important, I think, for you to understand that people are more comfortable with eyewitness accounts, with their own family stories. So I hope this helps. I hope this gives you some ideas, and I look forward to seeing your projects when they're done. Thanks.